The first panel is going to be looking at work placement and SBAT, and that'll be chaired by Dr. David Williams. So David, would you come out? And I'd ask if Gerard Delany, if you'd come out. Gerard's the New South Wales Department of Education Leader, Career and Workplace Learning Skills and Pathways. Thanks, Gerard. Carol Amorim. Carol is the AIS New South Wales 8 RTO Manager. Thank you, Carol. Michael Morris, if you'd come out. Michael's the Education Officer for Vocational Education and Training Team, Education and Research Directory, Sydney Catholic Schools. Thank you, Michael. Brendan Gembitsky is the New South Wales Department of Education Manager Work Placement Coordinator, Programs, Pathways and Transitions. Thank you, Brendan. And Adam Knight. Thanks, Adam. Adam's the New South Wales Department of Education Manager, School-Based Apprenticeships and Trainee Skills and Pathways. So I'll hand over to the very capable hands of Dr. David Williams to chair this session. Thanks, David.
Thanks very much, Chris. The MC is doing a great job, isn't he? He is. He really is. I think we'll keep him on permanently for these events. You interested in that, Chris? No, okay. Can I just share a story? I'd like to just welcome all of our panellists here today. Woo! Woo! And I just got to tell a little story that relates to, I think, what's been going on today. In 1977, I was working for Alcoa of Australia in Victoria, and in a sort of a HR role, and I got seconded onto this little task force to look at improving the communications within the company, a big international company. And what we were looking at forming this task force for was to look at a new form of communication. And we were looking at a thing called a fax. There's probably people here don't even know what a fax is. Anyway, we got this show together, and we set up a couple of rooms, and we had this huge fax, this huge machinery. And we gave the go, make the call. And 5 of us stood around, and this thing went took, 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 just went on, and this bit of paper moved out, and there was a photo of the Alcoa logo on there. And it was just outstanding to think that you could send photographs down a telephone line. And here we are today. It's just unbelievable. In 2023, we're all into using chat GT, yeah, got it, I've got it, I'm really with it now. And Menti, yeah, oh, see, I've really picked it up so quickly. But it sort of sets the scene, I think, for just in a short amount of time. I know that 77 was a long while ago, but in a short period of time, particularly recently, how technology has just increased and processes are just so different, you know, and phones and all those sorts of things. And it's become a very exciting time for everyone. And how's it going to sort of impact on the vet sector, and in particular vet education? So we've got a very talented and informed group of individuals here today. And what I'm going to sort of ask each of them to do is to think about the things that excite you and try and express what are the things that have excited you about these technological changes, and in particular in vet, and then the sorts of things that you may be finding as being a bit of an issue. And I sent something out to you about five days or so ago, talking about innovation and how that has really, really changed things, and the implementation of that innovation in relation to the whole vet sector. So, Gerard, can we start with you?
Thanks, David. I think we're asked to have a look at innovation versus integration. So I always see that in the vet space, particularly here in New South Wales, we've always been innovative. So one of the key drivers in terms of vocational education and training delivered to secondary schools is about not only meeting the standards for RTOs, but we also need to meet the requirements in terms of NESA requirements around the HSC, the ROSA and the HSC. So we've constantly, all three school sectors, the Department of Education, the Catholic sector and the independent sector, has had to juggle that innovation and integration in the context of the policy setting. So the standards and the legislation that's around the Education Act plus RTOs. So we've had to be innovative. So you have a look at some of the great work that the three school sectors have been doing over the years, particularly since VET came in as part of the higher school certificate. We've had to adjust the way that we do things to integrate VET as part of the higher school certificate, predicated on those two key drivers, the standards for RTOs plus the requirements for NESA. So we've had to be innovative to be integrated into the HSC. And without that innovation, then we find that we can't be as well integrated. And that requires, to a certain extent, some policy changes. So David asked, well, what excites you? I'm excited about the change to the categorisation of VET courses here in New South Wales, because we had to be really innovative to ensure that we met the HSC requirements in terms of the pattern of study. We had to innovate and show that we were able to meet those requirements, but that categorisation was one of those key factors that meant that we couldn't truly be integrated the way that we want it to be. So for me, I'm really excited about the change to the categorisation for the HSC of those VET courses, because it's making a statement that VET is the same as any other subject, but it allows us the opportunity for students to choose multiple VET courses and not worry about that. So there's that policy tension between innovation versus integration.
Thanks, Brenda. Carol.
Well, I totally agree with what Gerard said. To say that we were cheering when they announced the removal of the categories was extraordinary to see the bifurcation removed in the curriculum. It meant that students who want to do more than one VET course could count that towards an ATAR, and that just means more young people doing what they enjoy. They're going to thrive, and I think I said to a colleague here from the Department of Education that really, if our students are all doing courses that engage them, inspire them to be creative, we all benefit in New South Wales from that. So in terms of innovation, I've been part of the independent school sector now for 2 years, and I have seen independent schools embrace opportunities within the curriculum, whether it's VET or other courses, and be very creative in making sure that they make them available to their students. And some ways they do that, it's not the traditional pattern of study where it's a 2-unit by 2 years. Many schools deliver a 4x1, say in a course like construction or hospitality, because it's really hard to staff TAS KLAs in many parts of New South Wales. So schools are being creative. Some schools even look at doing vocational education and training courses, but don't contribute it to NESA. So they're still wanting their students to have access to a VET pathway, be credentialed, but it's not counting towards their pattern of study, but they see the value of doing a VET course. And I am inspired by that. And what really gets me going is seeing students having aha moments, getting employment from their work placement. The number of students who get jobs is not celebrated enough. And we need to do more to promote that. I love when I see a teacher who's gone through the rigour of training or the rigour of an upgrade, and they see one of their students in their class excel, and I see the look on their face. It inspires me, because as Gerard pointed out, there is a lot of red tape in VET. It's constantly changing. And in courses like we were talking about, like business services, by the time the training package comes out, it's already outdated with what's happening in industry. And you mentioned the fax machine. I was just having that conversation with my daughter who's about to finish her master's in physio, but is working in a receptionist at a medical centre. And she said all the communication is still by fax. And I was shocked that the whole medical fraternity is still relying on fax machines, whereas in education, you don't even see one anymore. Like, they've disappeared, and in other parts. So I found that very interesting. But it's teachers who continually think outside the square that make new opportunities available for students in schools, and can't do it without them.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Carol. Michael.
Thank you. I go back that far as well, David. My first office job, I had to use a microfiche. Now, 3/4 of the people in the room don't even know what a microfiche is, so I'll let you do some research into that later, but it's got nothing to do with phishing, unless it's, the similar thing, I suppose, is it's a big waste of time. That's what I can recall of the microfiche. So I'll just mention something, and I'll come around to talking about innovation and integration from a different perspective. What's the number one news item, maybe number two sometimes, every first Tuesday of the month? Interest rates, thank you. And I'm sure 90% of, if not more of you, know that. The other 10% people are renting. So, but why am I mentioning interest rates? Well, interest rates are going up and have been going up now for a couple of years. I came off fixed interest rates last week, so I'm $300 a week extra as of this week. But interest rates have been pushed up deliberately by the Reserve Bank in order to achieve a certain goal, that is to slow the economy down to try to ease inflation. And the way it does that is by making people like me stop spending money, and people who are paying higher rent because their landlords have had to pay more money to have less money in their pocket to spend, and businesses have to pay more for borrowing. And the whole idea of the purpose of it is to slow down the economy, and the end result potentially is that people either lose jobs, get evicted from homes, perhaps lose their home, and there's all this pressure on employers and on mortgage holders, on employees. How do we get around this? How do we get out of this cycle? And it started for mainly external reasons. But how do we get around it? Innovation, integration, and I'll throw another one in there, productivity. If you listen to the news reports, as I do a lot, it's around real wages. Real wages is what's the output that you can get from a person's wages? And it's innovation and it's integration, and therefore productivity, that would enable us to be able to produce more with the same amount of inputs, whether that be capital, whether that be workers, whether it's the way that an employer uses their enterprise to be able to mix capital and workers to achieve more output. And what's the obvious way of doing that? Becoming skilled. That's what we're here for. That's what vocational education and training is all about. It's about individuals becoming better skilled, and by being better skilled they can command higher wages, and so they get out of that cycle. Their employers, when they employ better skilled workers, and ideally if they put their own workers through training, and that involves apprenticeships, traineeships and the like, can get the benefits associated with that those extra skills, and then the employer uses that integration and that innovation to mix it to become more profitable. The employers get higher wages, and we don't have so much pressure on the first Tuesday of the month. So that'll do for now.
Brendan. Are you off? You might want to swap with Mike.
Great. Can you hear me all right? Thank you. All right, well, that's a really hard act to follow, those three conversations. I mean, we're all sort of just divulging how old we are, what kinds of things we remember about work. I'm not going to disclose my age. You can kind of guess, make up your own mind about that. But what got me into the work that I do, and for those of you who don't know, I manage the Work Placement Coordination Program in New South Wales. And our headline, if you like, is that each year we have more than 60,000 students who go out and spend a week with an employer undertaking a course of structured work placement. Why did I get into this? Well, years ago when I graduated from university, and that was last century, I kind of thought, well, I'm in this sort of policy space around the labour market, young people, and of course the big issues in the 90s, it didn't matter where you were, whereabouts in the world. Youth unemployment was chronic. It come off the back of a massive recession, a worldwide recession. People were trying to figure out ways in which we could solve this problem, and of course it always came down to the same things. Either employers were saying, well, young people don't have the qualifications that we need, so they're not work ready. And the other side of that was that, well, there just simply were not enough jobs. And no matter which way you looked at it, it seemed to me that the biggest issue was going to be if we couldn't, I guess, provide young people with opportunities to enter the labour market early enough, that did hold them back. It tended to have a cumulative effect on them getting a good employment pathway. And when I came to Australia, I heard about this thing called the ASTF, and that's a long time ago now. What this organisation did, it was funded by the federal government in partnership with state governments, but the plan was to basically provide opportunities for students at school to get real qualifications, get real workplace learning experience, things that employers would really respond to, and hopefully carve out a more and better planned employment pathway. We're still doing that. It's now 2023. Our program's been through a whole range of ups and downs. Governments have been really keen to support, I guess, the whole vet world and put funds in. Other governments have been less keen. But where we've got to now is we're in, again, I suspect, another one of these crises that may be about to overtake us. It might be economic, it might be technologically driven as well. And certainly, I think the thing that excites me the most is I get to see firsthand, day to day, not directly by working with students. I've got a better mechanism. I've got 15 work placement service providers across New South Wales who really do the job that I think it's so incredibly hard to describe because it's so simple and yet it's so effective. They basically build partnerships between our schools and employers, local industry. And on the basis of doing that, we provide great work placement opportunities for our students. Of course, like everything else, industry, courses, those kinds of things, it comes down to the willingness of employers to take students, and anyone who's a teacher in this room will know, depending on the course that you're delivering, it might be a relatively simple thing to get your whole class sorted out with a good work placement, or it might be incredibly hard. And I'm going to move on to that now because I don't want to take up too much time. We talked about innovation, and I'd love to say that the Department of Education, our school sectors, the whole world we work in is just driven by innovation. Unfortunately, we're not quite as capable of that, but I think we are capable of responding. And it's an open secret for years that it has been incredibly hard to source good quality work placements in the IDT world and also in business services. And a couple of things have happened. Partly, I think COVID changed the way in which, I guess, the comforting world work used to work in, made employers think differently, but also it changed the way in which we thought as well about what constituted a work placement. And so for the last 2 years, the Department of Education, with our work placement service providers, and more importantly, and our sector partners, but more importantly industry, have come up with some really innovative ways to do work placement for these areas that are really hard to source work placements. If you're a student who's enrolled in Broken Hill or Gunnedah and you're doing IDT, what do you think the chances are that you're going to get a high quality IDT work placement with a good host employer? It's hard enough in Sydney. The Googles and the Microsofts don't readily take our students on work placement. So we've had to rethink how we do this. And Amazon Web Services have been really important in that space. They've partnered with us and with our work placement service providers to develop a week of virtual work placement. Now, that's challenging in one way. What is virtual work placement? What are the kids going to do? They're going to sit in front of screens and just punch keyboards? No, it goes well beyond that. And I won't go too much into the detail, but what I would say is that everybody has learnt from this experience, particularly the young people involved. Work placement service providers have had to learn how to do work placement in a very different way. And part of that has been to work with our schools to say, well, this is what we're going to do. But on the other side, Amazon have learnt an awful lot engaging with our students. And in year 2 of the virtual work placement, we've been able to offer far more specialisation than we ever thought was possible. The students have been able to achieve far more. And we had an incredible lineup of, I guess, projects that students wanted to showcase at the end of the week. I got on the train the other day, and Gerard said this story, I think he's a bit sick of it, but during the virtual work placement week, I hopped on the train at Parramatta with my headphones on in my quiet space, and the carriage started filling up with students from the local government school there. They were noisy, and I thought, oh gosh, that's what I need, I'm trying to listen to this. And I heard through the headphones one of the students say to the others, oh, shut up, you guys, I'm trying to do my virtual work placement with Amazon at the moment. So that was exciting and motivating. Look, I've spoken too much. I'm going to hand it over to Adam.
Thanks,
Brendan.
Thanks very much, Brendan.
Thank you. So I'll come from a bit of a different perspective with the SBAT program. In regards to innovation, I've been doing a lot of work recently with different industries and liaising a lot with our ITABs. And as you know, with the teacher shortage, some access to some training can be quite difficult. So we've been looking at innovative ways of looking at alternate qualifications that might fit into that workplace. So more recently, working in one sector, we've been able to access one qualification that was never been made available to SBATs before. So we had a New South Wales first in Western New South Wales for with Certificate 3 in Hospital Health and Pharmacy. And instead of looking at the traditional retail, the community pharmacy qualification, we're also doing some work at the moment with other ITABs around dairy industry. There's been some shifts in the technology that's being used in dairy production, and they're now interested in engaging in SBATs as a part of promoting the industry as well, and allowing students to start their careers a bit earlier. And then from a technology side of things, in regards to SBATs, the department's been working on a process to make the establishment process for SBATs a lot more accessible by a paperless online system that should hopefully be deployed in around term 4 to term 1 this year, that will also allow us to capture data of students who not just want to start an SBAT or in the process of starting an SBAT, but who are just interested and want to put it on our radar, so we can then keep in mind access to training, different employers and different programs that come up with our SBAT program from time to time.
Thank you. Brendan mentioned work placement, and I'll just give a little bit of input into that. We have a a group of providers, work placement providers, about 15 of them, covering the entire state. We've each got our own footprint. Our footprints are different to the guys in the Illawarra and guys in other areas, Newcastle, it's just amazing the number of students that are involved in the whole work placement activity across a whole range of different frameworks. It's very, very satisfying. And in particular, at the end of it, when we have these awards at the end of the year, where students have been nominated by host employers, that's fantastic, but even better when they get a job. So, next question, what excites you? Yeah, start from this end.
Okay, what excites me is I like the opportunity to work with our industry, with our stakeholders, with our school sectors, to look at these different qualifications, access to training, things like that. Because essentially we're working together to shape the workforce of New South Wales moving forward. And the only way we can do that is to keep up with, current demand, trends and innovation. And that, to me, that means no 2 days are the same. The people that I deal with every day are different to the day than what I deal with the previous day. And it keeps you on your toes. Yep.
Well, I'm going to agree with you on all of that, Adam. I think that pretty much sums things up. But I would say as well, as David mentioned, being able to speak to people who organise the work placements, our work placement service providers on a day-to-day basis is always interesting. I'm always curious and about the kinds of issues that we face with organising work placement. The best thing about the job, being called by an employer who wants to host students and being able to pass them on to a work placement service provider, give them background, talk them through, it can be an onerous process. And also the opportunity to talk to teachers and to our sector partners, which we do on a regular basis as well, to improve the program.
That's brilliant.
Thank you. I'm excited by the idea, and these figures might be a little bit out of date, but last time I heard our students are going to have 7 careers and 17 different jobs, something like that. And it might vary slightly from that, but consider how difficult, therefore, it would be to train a young person when we don't know the career that they're going to be working in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, and it perhaps hasn't even existed yet. No one's even thought of it yet, and that's the reality. So, the best thing we can do is to train our students to have employability skills, and those employability skills, things like collaboration, things like planning, organising, communication, technology. I can't remember them all, but we can rattle them off if we had to spend enough time here. And it depends on which Google search you look at as to how many employability skills there are. But we all know what we're talking about there. Don't call them soft skills because they're not soft. Okay, they're important and they're valuable. But the significant thing is employabilities can't be taught on their own. They themselves have value and are going to stay with those young people for the rest of their lives, potentially, if you build in adaptability and flexibility into them. The way to teach employability skills is through a particular career. So it's getting them to do a particular qualification, a particular course. And in some ways, it doesn't matter which one it is. If it holds their interest, if it excites them for now, that's okay. Many of us are doing something completely different from what we started off doing after we finished our HSC. That doesn't mean that whatever that training was, whatever that qualification or learning was not worth it. We've become adaptable, we've become flexible. Our skills are such that we can cope with this changing world, and the young people are going to have even more changes that they have to deal with. And the only way to teach these employability skills is through actual doing a qualification, doing a trade, doing a vocation, a career. And the best way to actually learn is by doing. Claire mentioned this morning that the pilot did all the right thing in order to land his plane on the river. However, most of the passengers didn't know how to put their life vests on, etc. He learnt because he was doing. We're in passive learning, where we're sitting and just listening and not actively doing, it doesn't sink in as well. So if we can have vocational education and training in schools, and we can lock that in with work placement, and even better with apprenticeships and traineeships. I won't call them SBATs because that's the past tense of someone spitting on me, is an SBAT. The SBAT program, I understand, but no one is an SBAT. They're either an apprentice or a trainee. They're a school-based apprentice or a school-based trainee, which is fair enough. We're in school. We know it's based in school if we're talking in vet in schools. I think the more we can label these young people as apprentices and trainees, the better their understanding of what they're doing, the better their parents' understanding of what they're potentially enrolling in, and the better an employer understands that this is a trainee, this is an apprentice. Those are some of the things that excite me. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
All right, thank you. Well, there's a lot in vet that excites me, but one of those things is alignment. Alignment between industry needs and student interest. And we have a variety of ways in which that takes place, but one of the stories that comes to mind is a young person in one of our independent schools. They had a neighbouring beekeeping business, and they had a student who was finally interested because this local employer would go next door and say, have you got anyone, have you got anyone, have you got anyone? And eventually they did have a student who was interested. And it took a whole lot of alignment between the sector. Adam was part of that conversation. We had to find an RTO. We had to get the course approved by NESA. But at the end of the day, we got it happening, and that young person is thriving, and that employer is absolutely delighted that they have someone who they've nurtured and who will continue in that business. Another thing that, in terms of alignment, that has been a huge success for the non-government sector is the recent change to funding for externally delivered vet. It is a huge win for Catholic Schools New South Wales and a huge win for the Association of Independent Schools, where every family is going to be financially better off to access a course, a vet course that is now delivered either at TAFE or another private provider. Every family, no matter what ICSIA level that particular school is now better off. And I think that that is a huge win for young people in many schools that often couldn't afford to access a TAFE course, for example, even though their school was on the same campus as the TAFE. And I am excited to see the numbers grow in vet. And I know in our sector, in terms of school-based apprentices and trainees, they have more than doubled in the last 3 years. So we're up to nearly 600 school-based apprentices and trainees. So schools are looking at different pathways and opportunities and alignment with their local industry. And in vet, we've seen a 31% increase in enrolment in 12 months. We would anticipate that happening again now with the change to this EVET funding, but also the removal of the categories. And that's just a huge win for all of us.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Carol. Brendan?
Gerard.
Gerard.
I'm also excited about the growth in enrolments in vet across the state. As I said, that categorisation is a real change in terms of going to influence the number of enrolments. But we need to step back in terms of what excites me, particularly as a leading one of the pillars of the, I'll take a step back. At the end of last year, the Department of Education announced a pathway strategy for secondary students. And really there were 4 pillars as part of that pathway strategy. Education reform, so leading to change. Career education is a key pillar of that. Linking the work that we do back across with industry. And the fourth pillar is that vocational education and training within government schools. So what excites me is that we're going to ultimately see an increase in the number of VET enrolments across all three school sectors, because students, parents and schools understand the significant impact that VET will have on young people's lives to undertake a VET course, and what a difference that makes for young people. So I'm invigorated by the change. I think it's a real shift in terms of the way that we approach vocational education and training. And for me, in terms of leading that career education pillar for the Department of Education, it's about making certain that parents, so Claire and Jill talked this morning about engaging with parents as part of that. One of the key things as part of the pathway strategy is engaging parents in that space, so that parents are informed, so that they can engage their children as part of that career conversation, so that we're not just looking at those students doing subject selection, we're taking that information right back to primary school right up through high school. So we've done a couple of really innovative pieces of work in the department and within my team. So you may think, oh, well, this is not quite vocational education and training, but recently we launched the virtual tour of the Chow Chuck Wing Museum, which is part of Sydney University. It is a virtual tour. Students can access that across all three school sectors. It's linked back across to the Year 11 ancient history syllabus, but they can go in, they hear conversations from employees at the museum about the different types of jobs that are available working in a museum. But they can also have a look at the artefacts as part of that. And for me, it was really important that that resource is available, particularly in regional and remote parts of the state where they couldn't get to the Chow Chuck Wing Museum to experience that. They can now do that online. Their teachers now have access to those resources online. In fact, all three school sectors have access to those resources. And I look at that as an opportunity for us to, how do we provide those similar opportunities to students in the VET space for them to access some of those high quality work placement sites? How do we inspire young people to take that step and see that taking up a VET pathway is equally valued as any other pathway in the state? So I'm inspired by the fact that there are some real innovative processes in Train to highlight that vocational education is equally valued to any other pathway, and for that communication not only to go back across to schools and school leadership, but also to go to parents and also engage employers in that space, so they see the great work that we're doing as part of delivery of VET in our schools. We are held in high regard across the nation in terms of New South Wales VET delivery, and we need to acknowledge that, but there are lots of things that we can do to strengthen it.
Thank you very much, Gerard. I'm sorry for calling you Brendan, but I've always had a problem distinguishing twins. I was wondering if we could now open it up to questions from the floor. Anyone have any questions they'd like to ask the panel? There would have to be one. Diana.
Thank you, Gerard. Mine is not a question, I'm sorry. after all that waiting for a question. It's more of a statement, I suppose, or something that potentially all of us within this room, and especially all of you who are people of great influence, I think it's also, there's been a number of comments that are very valid here when we're talking about the value that certainly vocational education offers all of our young people. And the part that I want to acknowledge is that in order for these young people to have such great experiences, we need outstanding teachers and trainers to be able to deliver that information to our young people. And we often talk at the moment, there's lots of information, a lot of debate about acknowledging, you know, more pay for outcomes, and statistically, you know, data-driven, you know, these are the best outcomes, HSC results. How do we pay these outstanding teachers more money that get those results? And I just wanted to put out there that the people in this room are the greatest teachers and deliverers of the best outcomes for young people, whether they be in skills that they're offering those young people, whether it be in the relationships and the building of their careers and make them the people that they are. And I've often thought for many, many years, they're the people that deserve more money, but it's not always the data that we have in order that we measure. So being that we're talking about these sorts of things at the moment, we're looking at, you know, higher pay and, you know, kind of aligning that with outcomes. I think it'd be really pertinent to make sure that we continue to talk about vocational education and the outcomes and the great benefit add that provides for all of our young people in our schools, and therefore the greatest teachers, like I say, are those ones that are delivering on that and have been for many, many years. So in the analysis of what we're doing and when we're looking at the outcomes, I think that a big part of that is what we provide in vocational education. So big shout out to everyone in the room that's been doing that for many, many years. And certainly it'd be really great if we can continue to have that on the agenda when we're talking about outcomes. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, well, I'm Charlene. I'm from Apprenticeship Support Australia. I program manage one of our Women in Trades mentoring program, and I've met a number of young females, 14-year-old girls, that are wanting to enter into that, you know, apprenticeship space and non-traditional, you know, male-dominant. But I encounter a lot of parents, especially mothers, not wanting their daughters to go into that environment. Now, how do you see us overcoming that old school, you know, parenting and not wanting our daughters to go into those environments? Anyone at all?
We work closely with like lady tradies and women in trades, things like that, to raise awareness and promotion. There, in a previous role, I was still in the vet sector with training services. We developed some great resources, video resources around women in non-traditional trades. That's been really well received, and we've got some great ambassadors and role models out there to do that. But it's still, I mean, it has to come from everybody. Everybody has to be on board to break down those barriers and say, you know, well, this job isn't just for, you know, for the females, and this job isn't just for the males. These jobs are for everybody. So it is. We chip away at it, and we do the best that we can to raise awareness. But yeah, I think it's a bit of a group effort there as well. But it is, the parents are the absolute hardest crowd to convince. Yeah.
I'd probably say you don't know what you don't see. So if you do have some models of young women, and I know that there's been graduates from this very school who are highly successful electricians and are advocates for their employers, definitely get them out into schools talking in front of the parents at subject selections. Have videos, as Adam was mentioning, that you could share with a school. Even the sector representatives, if there's some useful videos, we'd be more than happy to be putting that on our website, because we know we get a lot of traffic through our website, as all the other sectors would do. So definitely having role models available for young women and their parents to see, and the voice of the parent as well. And I know that World Skills, in their videos that they put up, they've got the voice of the young person, they've got the voice of the school, they've got the voice of the parent, and that just says volumes.
Thank you.
So Just quickly to follow on from Carol as well, the HIA are doing a program at the moment for women in construction. So they'll be in touch with most schools over the coming term or so to run in-school workshops and information sessions for teachers and parents and anyone who's interested to attend.
We have time for one more question. Okay. Thank you very, very much to the panel. Would you please give them a round of applause?